hot jet flying son of a gun.
From the past.
I am a real American.
To the present. And the future.
Chair of wheels, more of lawn. Chair of wheels, more of lawn.
You are listening to Penn State's only WWE talk show, Marking Out with Jason Marcus and Matt Freiler.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the first Marking Out podcast of the summer. I'm your host, Jason Marcus. Now, usually alongside with me, I have my co-host, either Matt Freiler or Ryan Simpson. Unfortunately, right now, they're both currently at work doing some stuff for minor league baseball. Ryan is out with the Washington Wild Things in Pennsylvania, and Matt is with the Saugatury Stallions in New York. So we're going to try and get them on at some point during this summer, but for right now, it is just me today, and I could not be happier to be here talking with you guys. It's been a long time since we last were on the air. I believe it was the end of April. We left off right before the start of the greatest Royal Rumble event from the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. So it's been a long 2 months, and we've got a lot to cover, a lot to talk about here in terms of the world of professional wrestling. So I think for this podcast, that's exactly what we're going to be doing. We're going to be talking exclusively about the stories that happened the past 2 months, and then that way we'll be caught up in current time for Thursday's show. So, like I said, the last time we had talked, it was the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia hosting the greatest Royal Rumble event, and overall I thought it was a really good show. Nothing too exciting. There were two main storylines that came out of that show that I feel like we need to talk about, need to address, and those two storylines being the ones pertaining to the top belts in the WWE, both the Universal Championship and the WWE Championship. So I'll start with the Universal Championship since that was the most controversial of the two. Obviously, in that match, we had the champion Brock Lesnar defending the WWE Universal Championship against the challenger Roman Reigns, right hot off of their main event match at WrestleMania 34, in which Lesnar was surprisingly successful in defending his title. Not many people saw that one coming. So, they're coming into the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia tonight, defending their title inside of a steel cage, and the finish of this match is actually a botched finish. Roman Reigns spears Lesnar through the cage, and it is clear from the replays that Roman's feet hit the floor, thus he should be crowned the new WWE Universal Champion. However, that is not the case. The referees say that Brock Lesnar's back hit the ground first in what was clearly a botched finish by the talent, so they award the win to Lesnar, even though by all rules of professional wrestling, if you can go by rules of professional wrestling, he should have lost the title, but he retains the title, and that's actually the last defense we have seen of Brock Lesnar to this point. So obviously Roman Reigns, kind of got screwed out of the title here in a very controversial finish, and it was actually really interesting because the WWE did something here that they don't usually do. They actually admitted to their mistakes, surprisingly enough. They incorporated into the storyline going forward here. They actually had the referee send out a tweet online saying, hey, I made the wrong call. Roman should have probably won this match, but we're going to keep going with this decision that the referee made. So Brock Lesnar is still currently your WWE Universal Champion, albeit controversy surrounding many facets. Obviously, he's got a lot of talk right now about him going potentially back to the UFC. We'll talk a little bit more about on that the next show on Thursday. But right now, for the state of this WWE title picture, it's been very hard the past couple of months to really get invested in specifically the Raw brand because the title isn't really defended ever. Like I said, the last time the title was defended was about 2 months ago, and it probably won't be defended until SummerSlam if we're lucky. Of course, there's rumors are that won't even happen. So it'll be interesting to see what that match for SummerSlam is. I would predict that they're going to go back with another Roman Reigns, Brock Lesnar match because it does go into the storyline of Reigns should have won the championship, but he didn't. But as a fan's perspective, obviously that's not something I really want to see. I think there are many other superstars, specifically on the Raw roster, that the fans, myself included, would rather see in that spot. But you got to believe that this match at SummerSlam is going to be another Roman versus Brock, like it or not. I'm not sure what the finish for this is going to be, but as of right now, the WWE title picture, the Universal title picture, is just, quite frankly, very boring, and it's very hard to get invested in a champion who only appears once every 3 months. So that's the Universal title picture. We haven't really missed much. As far as the other controversial match from the Greatest Royal Rumble event, we also had a controversial finish with the WWE Championship match. It was, of course, AJ Styles, the WWE Champion, defending against Shinsuke Nakamura. And the finish here was kind of odd. It was a double countout, which you don't see a lot in professional wrestling. So by rules of the WWE, AJ Styles, the champion, retains it. He has the championship advantage. It set up a rematch for the following month against Backlash, and the finish there was kind of more the same. It was not a double countout, but a double. Both men couldn't make it to their feet, which is even more rare than the double countout that we saw at the last match previous to that one. So they finally have their blow-off match at Money in the Bank. It's actually a really good match here, but AJ Styles does come away with the win in a last man standing match. Great effort by both guys, but the thing I take away most from this is it fair to say that the Shinsuke Nakamura experiment on the main roster is officially a fail? Now, I know that he's currently in a program with Jeff Hardy, which, like I said, we'll talk more about on Thursday. But this is now his second consecutive WWE title program in a row that he comes out on the losing end. He lost to Jinder Mahal in those series of matches, couldn't win the title. Then he has these series of matches with AJ Styles. He even turns heel, gets a new character change, and everyone's thinking, oh, now Shinsuke's heel. Now this is the time to put the belt on him. He's doing great work. He didn't really connect as a babyface. He's doing a much better as heel. Management still doesn't put the belt on him. So what does that tell you? It can't be that Shinsuke doesn't have the ability to connect with the crowd, because we know he does from his time with NXT and his time with New Japan Pro Wrestling. Shinsuke has the talent. I just don't think there's faith behind him from management to say this is the guy that's going to lead our company. And granted, it is hard too when you also have AJ Styles on the roster, who's arguably the best wrestler in the world right now. So it's hard to say whether or not this is a fail on Shinsuke's part or it's just wrong place, wrong time. But either way, I think Shinsuke needs to build some momentum quick. Otherwise, his stock is quickly going downhill, specifically on the main roster here. I think this mid-card title run that he might potentially have coming up is the best thing for him. But if he can't win the United States Championship, I'm not sure what's in stake for Shinsuke Nakamura. So that's the state of the WWE title picture right now. The other thing that happened on that show that I really want to talk about was we saw in the last 2 months the arrival of Bobby Lashley. Bobby Lashley was with the company about 10 years ago. He had a decent run. He was pushed to the moon. He was the ECW champion for what that is worth. And it seemed like the company was really behind him. He went away for a little bit due to injuries, became a big star in the MMA world and in Impact Wrestling. But he's brought back to WWE, and he's put right into a feud with Sami Zayn. And to say the least, it is not good. Neither of them look great. Bobby Lashley specifically, it's his first big program since coming back for the company, like I said, in 10 years. And it's just an absolute mess. It's one of the worst programs that the WWE has done of late, and there's been some pretty bad ones, so that should tell you all that. So I don't know where Bobby Lashley goes from here. He's obviously got some big potential. He's currently in a program with Roman Reigns. You would think the winner of that's going to go to SummerSlam, so we'll see what happens this Sunday with Lashley, but so far, to start off his career, it's not looking good for the Dominator here. But hey, the management had faith in him before, so I'll believe that they'll have faith in him again, and hopefully he'll get back to where he was. All right, we're going to take our first break, but when we come back, we're going to talk about the state of the Women's Championship, specifically Carmella, and as well as Big Cass and Enzo. You're listening to Marking Out, Penn State's only pro wrestling exclusive podcast. We will be right back.
Now, back to Com Radio's only WWE talk show, Marking Out with Jason Marcus and Matt Freiler.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to Marking Out, Penn State's only pro wrestling exclusive podcast. I'm your host, Jason Marcus, and right now we're talking about the biggest stories, matches, and moments of the past 2 months within the world of professional wrestling. We just finished up talking about the WWE and Universal title pictures. Now we're going to move on a little bit to the lower card, the women's division, and specifically Daniel Bryan, Big Cass, and Enzo Amore. So we'll start with the women's championship. As we were coming out of the Greatest Royal Rumble, we saw Charlotte as the SmackDown Women's Champion champion. She actually loses that belt to Carmella after she cashes in her Money in the Bank briefcase. And I thought that this was a good moment as far as surprise factor, but as far as whether or not I think Carmella's a credible champion, I think it's yet to be seen. It's without a doubt she's improved tremendously from where she was specifically in NXT or her first time in the main roster. She really does a good job of creating heat. She is very annoying for what it's worth, so I guess she is doing her job. But as far as a credibility standpoint in the ring, she just hasn't proved herself to me as much. Promo-wise, I think she's fantastic, but her match with Charlotte that she had at Backlash after winning the title from her was okay. I mean, Charlotte is one of those talents that can really carry anybody to a good match, so it wasn't terrible. It wasn't by far wasn't the worst match on the card, I can tell you that. But even the finish was a little weird. It was like some sort of like roll-up thing where she shouldn't have won, but I guess she won, and it was just odd. But anyway, so Charlotte currently is out of the title picture now. Carmella is still the champion. Like I said, she's okay. She's definitely doing a lot better than where she was at the beginning of her career, but I'm still not buying her as a legit threat like I am an Alexa Bliss on the other side. But so after Charlotte, Carmella goes now into a program with Asuka. Asuka was last had a match at WrestleMania 34 where her undefeated streak was lost to Charlotte. So she comes in and she's a heavy favorite. You would think she's had all this momentum coming in. She cooled off a lot after that loss at WrestleMania, but her against Carmella on the outside seems like it's a no-brainer. Asuka should win the title here, but obviously they just put the belt on Carmella for a reason, so you had to see a swerve coming, and that swerve came in the form of a returning James Ellsworth. Ellsworth worked for the company for a couple months, was let go about early 2018, maybe late 2017. But he makes his return here in the Money in the Bank preview. He returns as in the match with Carmella versus Asuka. He's in this robe and an Asuka mask, and it's supposed to be some sort of Asuka ghoulish-like figure. Whatever the intention was, it was very bad. It was very cringeworthy, to say the least. It was exciting to see James Ellsworth back on our televisions again because he is such a good character and a good heater for Carmella, which is what she needs at this point. But as far as the state of the SmackDown Women's title, I'm not buying it. Like I said, I think I appreciate Carmella's growth, but as far as her status as a champion, I just think there are so many other women more deserving of that spot. But hey, I hope she proves me wrong. I hope she has a great match with Asuka at Extreme Rules, which is the next match that we'll talk more about on Thursday. But for right now, the state of the women's title on SmackDown, not looking great. However, the women's title on Raw is a completely different story. Now, coming out of WrestleMania, we had Nia Jax as the current Raw Women's Champion. She beat Alexa Bliss for the title. She beat her again at Backlash to retain the title. We're kind of ambiguous whether or not she's a face or a heel at this point. They kind of went back and forth. Her feud with Alexa Bliss, she was the clear babyface, talking about, Alexa Bliss was like body shaming her, and she's talking, don't be a bully, be a star campaign, which, all right, fine, I can buy into that. But then they announced that she's going into a program at Money in the Bank with none other but then Ronda Rousey. Yes, that is Ronda Rousey, the first woman to ever be inducted into the UFC Hall of Fame. And she is now competing at Money in the Bank for the Raw Women's Championship in what is just her second televised match. And obviously, before WrestleMania, a lot of critics, myself included, didn't think Ronda Rousey had what it took right away to be a star in the WWE, and obviously she proved myself and many others wrong at WrestleMania. So there's a lot of hype going into her match with Nia Jax at Money in the Bank, and they actually put on a very, very good match. I think it's safe to say it's the best match Nia Jax has had on her main roster career yet. So that's awesome. Ronda Rousey stole the show. But what's really important to note here is the finish of the match, because earlier in the night at Money in the Bank, Alexa Bliss, the former champion, won the women's Money in the Bank ladder match. So she's now Miss Money in the Bank, and on the very same show, she interrupts the Nia Jax Ronda Rousey match, hits both of them with the briefcase, causes a double DQ. Nia Jax retains her title. But the story here is not Alexa Bliss would continue the assault with the briefcase on Nia Jax, actually cashes in her Money in the Bank contracts the same night to regain her Raw Women's Championship, and it's now looking to set up a program between Alexa Bliss and Ronda Rousey, which should be fantastic. And I think the big takeaway here from this is that the WWE has two huge stars on their hands, specifically on the Raw roster, one being Alexa Bliss and the other one being Ronda Rousey. We knew how good Bliss was, and I think we all wanted to believe that Rousey was as good, and I think she is more than willing to hold her own. So you got to believe that that's the direction that they're going for at SummerSlam, and I personally am very excited for it. I don't know if this is the time to put the belt on Rousey. Obviously, she's got a lot of hype right now with that Hall of Fame induction for the UFC. She's got a lot of media attention around her, but I don't know how you take the title off Bliss this early. I feel like there's more story to tell here with Rousey's chase for the gold. So I'm interested to see where it goes, but overall, the past couple months, the Raw Women's title has been significantly better than the SmackDown Women's title. Moving forward a little bit, also on the same card, Money in the Bank, we had Daniel Bryan versus Big Cass, and they had a match previously at Backlash. It was Big Cass's first pay-per-view match since returning from an ACL injury in mid to late 2017. So as a fan here, and I think me and Ryan Simpson talked about this in our last podcast here, it was a tight situation from a booking perspective because you had Daniel Bryan, who had just come back from injury of his own. This was his first singles match on a pay-per-view, and you think, well, you got to give him the win. But you also have a returning Big Cass, and you're not sure what they're going to do there. Are they really going to give him his first loss at his first pay-per-view? And, of course, at Backlash, Big Cass taps out clean to Daniel Bryan, sets up a rematch at Money in the Bank, and lo and behold, it's the same finish. So a lot of people scratching their heads at this one because looked like they were going to push Big Cass to the moon here. He looked like he was going to be the next big star for SmackDown. He was the last person eliminated at the Greatest Royal Rumble event, which Ryan correctly predicted that Braun Strowman would win. So it looked like Big Cass was really in tune to make some waves here on SmackDown. But just a couple days after his Money in the Bank loss to Daniel Bryan, it is revealed that Big Cass was released from the WWE, and if you want to know why he was released and what I think he will be doing when he comes back, then stay tuned because we're going to be talking about that. But right now, we're going to go to another break, so make sure that you keep it locked right here on Penn State's only pro wrestling podcast, Marking Out. We will be back in just 1 second.
Now back to Com Radio's only WWE talk show, Marking Out with Jason Marcus and Matt Freiler.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to Marking Out, Penn State's only pro wrestling exclusive podcast. We just finished up talking about the Daniel Bryan and Big Cass program that stretched from Backlash to Money in the Bank. As I was talking about, Big Cass comes in hot after his injury, looks to be pushed to the moon, but ends up dropping his first two pay-per-view matches from his return to Daniel Bryan, and then is quickly released from the WWE. Initially, a lot of confusion on the part, specifically the fans, specifically because he just came back and he looked like he was going to be one of the big stars for the company, but is quickly shown the door, and reports have then later come out that it's probably a multitude of factors. I think a lot of it was backstage heat. There were allegations that he went against director orders from Vince McMahon in some programs, just overall bad attitude. Plus, he's okay on the mic. Enzo was always the guy in their tag team who was kind of carrying the mic work. He was decent in the ring, but there was nothing really that he was great at, and he was injury prone. So I think a bunch of those factors resulted in his release from the company. Obviously, a big disappointment for Big Cass, who looked like he had a lot of potential here. But moving forward, I'd assume that in his WWE contract, there is a non-compete clause, so I would think it'll be at least a month or two before we see him in any other promotion. But to me, if I'm Big Cass, you also have, and I know some people aren't going to like this, but you also got Enzo Amore, a free agent now too. Obviously, he was released to the company months ago. Some sexual assault allegations have come out. He was later disproven, or the court didn't go to trial, so nothing convicted, but certainly did not help his reputation. And obviously, those two together were the best combination for each other. They both really floundered as single stars. Well, Well, Enzo had a little bit more success than Cass, but either way, there's no denying that when those two were together, they were by far at their most successful. So you'd believe that has to be going through their mind of, well, why don't we just get the band back together? We'll sell some more merch. And to me, I think that's a great idea. The only issue is after Cass got injured in mid-2017, Enzo Amore had some less than nice things to say about his former tag team partner on Twitter. So I'm not sure what the current status of their relationship is in real life. I don't know if it's repairable, but I would think if these guys were smart, they would put their egos aside, realize what's best for business, and know that if they want to continue making a career in the professional wrestling industry, that working together is far better than them working apart. I could very easily see them going to a company like Impact Wrestling. I think that's a great fit for them. They have this tendency to take old WWE stars that are no longer with the company, to kind of like shine them up and make them their top stars. So that seems like a natural fit. I could also see them doing some work in Ring of Honor, but also Enzo Amore just put out a rap single, so who knows what he wants to do. But I do think there's a future for Big Cass if he wants to continue down that road. I definitely think someone's willing to give him a shot. It's just all about where he's going to thrive most. So I would say Impact, but who's to know for sure. Also, last thing I want to talk about within the WWE before we move on to like some NXT news. I have to give a shout out to Seth Rollins for one of the heck of a great run with the Intercontinental title over the last couple months. He won the title at WrestleMania in a Fatal 4-Way match, and The Miz before him did a lot of work to elevate that title. In the past couple of years, the Intercontinental Championship has not been treated with the prestige that it rightfully deserves, and between The Miz and Seth Rollins, I think they really have done a good job of putting that mid-card title back to the prestige in which it deserves, specifically without Brock Lesnar being there to defend his Raw Universal Championship. I think putting the belt on Seth Rollins was a great move. He's on the best run of his career as far as in-ring work goes. Anytime Seth Rollins has stepped into that wrestling ring, he has stolen the show. I'm very excited for his match with Dolph Ziggler at Extreme Rules this Sunday. I'll go more into depth of that on Thursday's show, but I have to give credit to where credit is due. Seth Rollins is on the streak of his career right now, and I think he is in due time for a Universal title picture run. I personally would rather see him in the main event of SummerSlam than a Roman Reigns or a Bobby Lashley, but that's just one perspective. We'll see if that is actually going to happen. So we're going to shift gears a little bit now. We're going to go from the main roster WWE to NXT. A lot going on with NXT over the past 2 months. You had TakeOver Chicago, which I want to talk a little bit about. The opening match for that was the Undisputed Era, the team of Kyle O'Reilly and Roderick Strong, defending the NXT Tag Team Championships against the team of Oney Lorcan and Danny Burch. And I will be the first one to tell you that, like many times with the NXT TakeOvers, I wasn't too invested in this match. I like the Undisputed Era. I think they're great. Lorcan and Burch really showed out at this match. They had a incredible match here in Chicago to open the card, and it really put both of those guys on the map. Unfortunately for Lorcan, he gets hurt in here, and it just could not be worse timing, because I think if he would have stayed healthy after this, or that injury didn't happen, he would have had a big push coming his way, especially with the rise of this new NXT UK brand that was announced a couple months later. So before we get to NXT UK, I want to talk a little bit more about TakeOver Chicago. So like I said, Undisputed Era versus Lorcan and Burch, great match. I love the Undisputed Era as tag team champions. And then, of course, you had Velveteen Dream versus Ricochet, which delivered on all aspects. Everyone knows that those two talents are some of the best in the entire world of professional wrestling. To see those two young guys go up against each other was nothing short of phenomenal. They both have great futures in this company. I think Velveteen Dream is going to get the call up to the main roster before Ricochet. I just think he's that good and he's that different of a character. But either way, both guys are going to have great careers within the WWE, so I'm excited to see where both of those guys go. But then, of course, the main event of TakeOver Chicago saw the grudge match between Tommaso Ciampa and Johnny Gargano. And let me tell you, you want to talk about two of the best professional wrestlers in the world today, possibly for different reasons. Gargano, from an in-ring standpoint, he is just doing excellent work as a sympathetic babyface here. Every time he steps in the ring, similar to Seth Rollins, it's just he's going to steal a show. And Tommaso Ciampa, I have to give credit to where credit is due as well. Not only in the ring, but his heel work is some of the best I've seen in years. He's really consistent with it, similar to how Kevin Owens is, where even like when he's not in character, he's in character. And I think that's what makes this rivalry and these matches so good, is that we all know that the personal history of these guys being really close friends to now bitter enemies, if you want to call it. So you have that chemistry together, and then you take them individually, and they're both just doing absolute great work from both standpoints here, and it's just a recipe for fantastic professional wrestling. So they have their first match at TakeOver New Orleans, in which Johnny Gargano gets the win. They have this rematch now, TakeOver Chicago, in a Chicago street fight, and it is absolutely brutal. These two guys beat the heck out of each other, to put it politely, and it was a brutal affair. There was some great psychology work here. You had the spot where Tommaso Ciampa takes the wedding ring off of Johnny Gargano's finger, spits on it, and throws it into the crowd. Just absolutely fantastic heel work from Ciampa there. He's proving that he is on an absolute another level right now. Finish of the match, you have Johnny Gargano at one point brought out handcuffs to handcuff Tommaso Ciampa's hands together behind his back. So it looks like Gargano kind of has Ciampa exactly where he wants him. But one false move, Gargano's trying to get into the ring. Ciampa hooks his head underneath his arm that is handcuffed behind his back and hits him with a spiked DDT onto an exposed floorboards that Ciampa had taken up earlier in the match, and Ciampa is able to get the 1-2-3 for the win here. So evens the series up in 1-1 for Ciampa and Gargano, and currently on NXT television, they are looking like Ciampa is now moving on towards a program with the NXT champion Aleister Black, but there's definitely some seeds here of the rivalry between Gargano and Ciampa to be far from finished. So I'm excited to see where they go. I think they will have one more match at NXT TakeOver Brooklyn, and that might be the end of it. I think we'll see Gargano or possibly even Ciampa be called up to the main roster after that. But my hat's off to these two guys. I think they are probably the best thing that was going on this summer in all of professional wrestling. Possibly. There is one more thing going on, but we'll talk about that at the end of the show. But again, just as a fan, nothing but respect for both Ciampa and Gargano. An absolutely fantastic program. Moving on to the NXT UK tournament. So NXT UK champion Pete Dunne has held his NXT UK championship for over a year now, and it was just a couple weeks ago that the WWE Network held a NXT UK tournament. It was, I believe, 16 of the superstars from the United Kingdom, independent superstars. Winner of the tournament would face Pete Dunne for the NXT UK championship later in that night. The tournament is ultimately won by Zach Gibson, a heel from Liverpool's number one. And you know, I was watching this tournament, and I respect great professional wrestling. All those guys put those bodies on the line, put on a really good show. As far as from a character standpoint, though, there were very few guys within the tournament that I felt very connected to right away, and I think that's a stark contrast from where it was the last incarnation of the NXT UK tournament. I think just right away, I was very interested in Tyler Bate. I was very interested in Pete Dunne. This time around, it wasn't so much. There really wasn't anybody that stood out to me and go, oh, I can't wait to see that guy again. Gibson did great. I thought his tournament run was very impressive. He ends up actually losing to Pete Dunne, so Pete Dunne does retain the NXT title here on the network. But the big story is that NXT is now moving forward into a global territorization route. They announced the start of the NXT UK brand with general manager Johnny Saint, a legend of British wrestling. So it'll be interesting to see where they go from here. They have announced a couple more live events going forward. I think there's two superstars in particular. And if you're a big fan of professional wrestling, you might have an idea who I'm talking about here. There are two British superstars on the independent scene right now that I think if they were to be able to be brought into the NXT UK brand, they could take it possibly to the next level. And those two guys are Zack Sabre Jr. and Will Ospreay. I think if you could land those two guys, and with the TV deals that the WWE just got, there's no reason to say that they don't throw money at these guys. If you can bring those guys in and help build that NXT UK brand, that would be, from my perspective at least, absolutely great business. I would tune in right away because those are without argument, two of the best professional wrestlers in the world right now. They fit the model of what they're trying to do here. I think it would be a foolish move to not at least consider bringing those two guys in. So it'll still yet to be seen what the future of the NXT UK brand is. I do trust Pete Dunne. I think he's also one of the best professional wrestlers in the world. They got a couple good tag teams in Mustache Mountain, which also, by the way, Mustache Mountain on that card beat Kyle O'Reilly and Roderick Strong to win the NXT UK Championship. So I think at that point it was more of just we need to change titles so we'll get a big pop. We're in the UK. These are British guys. Yada, yada, yada. It's promotional. It was a promotional change. Let's call it for what it is. I think Undisputed Era will eventually win the titles back. But nonetheless, that was a very good match. Happy to see a title change here to kind of, bring some eyes to this new NXT UK brand. But overall, I'm excited for the direction of it. I think Pete Dunne will be a great champion and be able to hold the brand. But like I said, if they could get Zack Sabre Jr. and Will Ospreay, I think they take that brand right away to the next level, maybe potentially be able to compete with the NXT incarnation here in North America, but that they also are on another level right now, so that'll be difficult. So that's pretty much all that's really going on for NXT at the moment. So what I want to do right now is I want to switch a little bit to the independent scene. I want to talk about New Japan Pro Wrestling. I want to talk about Ring of Honor, because boy, do we have a lot to talk about here. So I think the big story coming out of these past 2 months within these two promotions was their recent Dominion special. So a lot of really good matches on that card. You, of course, had Cody Rhodes versus Kota Ibushi, which was a great match. A lot of storylines there with the Bullet Club. But you also had Chris Jericho and Tetsuya Naito for the IWGP Intercontinental Championship. Jericho was last seen in New Japan Pro Wrestling after losing to Kenny Omega at Wrestle Kingdom 12. And there was a lot of speculation, is he one and done? What's he doing from here? He builds this program with Naito. He attacks him from behind. It's really great work. Jericho, again, on another level, even at 47 years old, he's still one of the best guys in the industry today. And I think a lot of people going into this thought that there's no way Jericho was going to win because of the IWGP Championship being on the line. But actually, it ended up being relatively a swerve here. Jericho ends up winning the title in a really great, really physical match. So it was nice to see Jericho kind of get the respect he deserves. I know he is not traditionally what people would think of as the New Japan Pro style, but I think this just goes to show how good Chris Jericho is. I think the calling card for Jericho that people have overlooked for years is he's one of the absolute best in the world at when it comes to reinventing his character and being able to get pretty much anything over. The guy got a list over for the WWE Universe, and I don't know how many people can do that. He's absolutely incredible. I think he is one of the most underrated professional wrestlers, possibly of all time. I don't think he gets the amount of credit that he deserves. But his match with Naito was really good. He does win the IWGP Intercontinental Championship. So he's a 10th Intercontinental title of all time, his first in New Japan Pro Wrestling. So I guess the question now is, where does Jericho go from here? You got to believe, he said he's not going to do any Japanese program on the United States out of respect for the WWE and Vince McMahon. So he's going to be working exclusively overseas. So hasn't been announced yet as to when Jericho's next match will be. I have a feeling I know who I would want to see his next opponent to be. We'll get into that in just a couple minutes here, but I just want to say, hats off to Jericho for being able to, once again, reinvent himself, prove that he is indeed the best in the world at what he does, and I look forward to seeing what he does in the future. But, of course, if you're going to talk about Dominion, you got to talk about Omega and Okada 4. For those of you guys who are mainly WWE exclusive, you maybe don't follow the independent scene, Ring of Honor, New Japan Pro Wrestling. That's absolutely fine. I personally haven't gotten into it until very recently, and it has a lot to do with these two guys. So before we get into the match, I'm going to set the scene. So I'll tell you a little bit of the backstory that we got going on here between Kenny Omega and the IWGP Heavyweight Champion Kazuchika Okada. So the first thing you need to know about these two guys is that you have the champion Kazuchika Okada, who has held the belt for over a year and a half. He has set the New Japan record for most consecutive title defenses with 12. So he has, for a year and a half, has challengers have come up, and they've all fallen. It's been one of the greatest title reigns in the history of the company. And then on the other side, you have Kenny Omega, who is one of the best pure professional wrestlers, if not the best pure professional wrestler in the world today, especially outside of WWE. I don't think there's a question there. And so their first match was at Wrestle Kingdom 11 last year. And for those of you unaware, Wrestle Kingdom is the Japanese version of WrestleMania. And so they had their first match there, and for the IWGP Heavyweight Championship, and Okada wins as part of his 12 title defenses. So it's an absolutely fantastic match. Dave Meltzer gave it, I believe, 6 stars, which out of a 5-star system, which shows you how good these two are. Sets the pro wrestling world on fire, and now they look forward to their rematch a couple months later at the Dominion special, where they two go 60 minutes and end with a double with a draw. So there's a 60-minute draw. Neither one gets the win. And this one is rated even higher by Dave Meltzer of the Wrestling Observer, who is basically the be-all, end-all of wrestling reviews. And so that's their second match. They go 60 minutes. Nobody wins. So you have Okada with 1 win, and then you have a tie in the second win. The third time they meet will be at last year's G1 special, which is their annual tournament to decide the number 1 contender for the title at Wrestle Kingdom. And this time, Kenny Omega and Okada Omega 3 goes even longer than their last match, and it ends up with Kenny Omega hitting his finisher, the One-Winged Angel, on Kazuchika Okada. So this match is not for the title, so Omega does get the win here. So he evens the series up at 1-1 and 1, and the story here is that Kenny Omega was not able to beat Kazuchika Okada until he hit the One-Winged Angel, and it only took 1, and after he hit it, Okada was down for the 3 count. So the story is, can Okada avoid the One-Winged Angel? Can Omega beat Okada? Can he win the IWGP Heavyweight Championship? He beats him in the G1, but Okada retains the title until this upcoming Dominion, which I will talk about as we come back from the break here. It is Omega Okada 4, and it is regarded as one of the best professional wrestling matches of all time. We'll continue to talk about it when we come back. You're listening to Marking Out, Penn State's only exclusive pro wrestling talk show.
Now back to Com Radio's only WWE talk show, Marking Out with Jason Marcus and Matt Freiler.
Hello and welcome back to Marking Out, Penn State's only pro wrestling exclusive talk show. I'm your host, Jason Marcus, and we had a lot to talk about on this episode. We're trying to cover the past 2 months of the entire industry of professional wrestling. No easy task, certainly, but where we are now as far as where we're going to end this show on is talking about New Japan Pro Wrestling and Ring of Honor, specifically their Dominion special. The main event, of course, was the champion Kazuchika Okada defending his IWGP Heavyweight Championship against the number 1 contender, Kenny Omega. And this time it is in a 2 out of 3 falls match. As I talked a little bit before the break about their brief history, the 3 matches that they had prior broke the 5-star rating scale that is traditionally used to rank wrestling matches. Dave Meltzer of the Wrestling Observer gave them, as high as a 6.25 star. For there's 3 matches out of 5. So these guys are absolutely lighting it up every time they get into the ring. And Okada is on the run of his career as the IWGP Heavyweight Championship, 12 successful title defenses in a row over that time period. And it seems like his biggest challenger is now the guy that he's only been able to beat once, and that is Kenny Omega. So we go into Dominion. Obviously, everyone's anticipating how are these guys going to top the last 3 matches that they possibly had. It's seemingly impossible. What else more can they do? It seems as if they had pulled everything out in the books that they possibly could have, but they managed to do it. So, like I said, it is a 2 out of 3 falls match. Match ends up going about 72 minutes, and that is... And if you're not a professional wrestling fan, I can see why that would be hard to understand why that's so impressive, but professional wrestling is probably one of the hardest forms of cardio that you could possibly do. You are constantly moving. There is not a lot of rest time when you're in a professional wrestling match. And then the fact that these two incredible athletes will be able to hold their own for 72 minutes just speaks to not only their conditioning as professional athletes, but just how good they are at their craft. So my hat's off to both of them. We'll go a little bit more in detail about the match here in a little bit. So the match starts off, and it's a relatively slow pace. Obviously, they know that they're going to be going 72 minutes. I don't blame them. But it really doesn't take long before these two guys really start to ramp it up a little bit. And as a fan, as I was watching this match, I was just in awe at how quickly these guys were able to go and how long these guys were able to go for. There was no rest holds. It was from one thing to another, and it was incredible to watch. But the first fall comes in about 20 minutes into the match. The story here is, Kenny Omega's hitting V-triggers, trying to do anything he can to score the first fall here over Okada. But the first fall is actually won by Okada after he gets a small package, counters a move into a small package to get the first fall. And one of the things that made this match so great was the psychology and the story that these two athletes were telling through their work. The story of the first fall was, what's Kenny? Kenny's the desperate one, right? He's the challenger here. He's the one that has everything to prove. So, he's trying to do all he can to put away Okada. Okada kicks out of everything, and Okada ends up getting the first fall just by a fluke, by rolling him up, and that's how the first fall ends. Well, after that happens, Omega and Okada, specifically Omega, is visibly irate. Great, like I said, just overall great storytelling and great emotion and psychology between these two, which is part of the reason what makes the match so good. So that's about 20 minutes in when we have our first fall. They probably go about another 20 to 30 minutes before we get our second fall. And the result of that is, like I had mentioned before, the story leading up to this fourth match was that the only time Omega was ever able to beat Okada in that G1 special in tournament, he hit his finisher, the One-Winged Angel, one time, and that's all it took to beat him. So the story is, if Omega can hit his finisher here, then it seems like it should be a clear win for him again. So about another 20 minutes after the first fall, so we're about 40 to 50 minutes into the match itself. So it's almost an hour in, and these guys still only have one fall. Absolutely incredible, but the second fall does come. Kenny Omega is able to hit his finisher, the One-Winged Angel, on Okada for the 1-2-3. So Omega ties up at 1-1. Like I said, we're about 50 minutes in, best 2 out of 3 falls match, and these guys, I can't even imagine going an hour and still realizing you have more to do. So my hat's off to both of these guys, but the score is 1-1 at this point between Omega and Okada, and the final match comes where there's a big spot where Omega actually hits another One-Winged Angel on Okada here, but he's able to get a rope break. So basically that means is he can't pin him because he's too close to the rope. So it looks like Omega's got the championship won. He hits his finisher, but he can't even pin him. Okada gets out of the ring. Again, great storytelling, great psychology. It's part of the reason that makes professional wrestling so exciting to me is the combination of just superior athleticism with great storytelling and big characters. That's why I love it so much. So the final fall comes, they're hitting finishers on each other, except for the One-Winged Angel, which is important to note. But there's a bunch of Rainmakers, which is Okada's finisher. A lot of near falls, a lot of 2 counts. But the final comes where Omega is actually able to hit the One-Winged Angel again for the third time in this match, picks up the 1, 2, 3, and Kenny Omega, for the first time in his career, wins the IWGP Heavyweight Championship. It's been a long time coming. Like I said, the match overall lasted a little bit over 72 minutes, so well over an hour. Just an absolutely insane showing from both of these guys. Obviously, there you have the heartbreak of Okada and his title reign coming to an end after such a great run, but you also have that mix of emotion where you have Kenny Omega, who is undoubtedly the best professional wrestler in the world, finally ascends to the top of the industry and becomes champion, and you have that feel-good story in between. So just an absolute perfect blend of in-ring work, psychology, conditioning, storytelling, anything and everything you could want in a professional wrestling match, this match had, and it was reflected in Dave Meltzer's star rating. And as we had talked about before in their 3 previous matches, Meltzer had gone off the 5-star rating and given them up to a 6.25 stars. He actually gives their 4th match here at Dominion 7 stars, which rubbed a bunch of people the wrong way within the professional wrestling community because it was almost as if he was making a joke of his own 5-star rating system. Meltzer, for those of you who don't know, of the Wrestling Observer, has been covering the professional wrestling industry for well over 60 years. He started officially in 1971. So that's a long time ago, about 40 years if my quick math is correct here. And he gave this match 7 stars, which he later explained means it was the best professional wrestling match that he had ever seen. And this is coming from the guy who's watched nothing but professional wrestling for well over 60 years, and he's saying that the match that the Omega and Okada just had at Dominion was the best professional wrestling match he had ever seen. So, for those of you who are exclusively WWE fans, I don't think you're able to see a full recap of the 72-minute match that these guys had, but there are several highlights on YouTube, which I do suggest you check out, because even just by watching the highlights alone, you get an idea of just how incredible these two athletes are. So it was really fun match to watch. It just proves that these two guys are on another level. Obviously, they have to now go their separate directions, at least for a little while. I do think there'll be a 5th match at some point. But now the question is, what do both of these guys do? Where do they go from here? So I'm going to start with the Kazuchika Okada a little bit. I think Okada, without a doubt, one of the best professional wrestlers in the world. Obviously, specifically in New Japan Pro Wrestling, he was the guy for about a year and a half. So he loses his title here at Dominion, and now the question is, well, what do you do from here? We have the G1 Climax coming up, which I had mentioned earlier, is this round-robin tournament where there is 2 blocks of superstars. So there's 8 superstars in each block, and they all wrestle each other. Winner, if you win, you get a certain amount of points, and basically whoever has the most amount of points at the end of the tournament becomes the number 1 contender for the championship. So that is coming up next for New Japan Pro Wrestling. Both Omega and Okada are in this tournament. If Omega, the champion, wins the tournament, he chooses his contender, or his challenger, I should say, at the next Wrestle Kingdom event. But I don't know if I see Okada winning this tournament, only because he's already established a star. And one of the things that the Japanese promotions love to do is they love to use this G1 Climax tournament to build new stars. So I don't see him winning it, but what I do see is another high-profile feud with maybe one other than the current IWGP Intercontinental Champion, Chris Jericho. Obviously, after Jericho beat Naito for the title at the Dominion event as well, the question is, well, when are we going to see Jericho next? And I think Jericho is at the point of his career where he's able to call the shots here. He is able to see, this is who I want to work with, this is when I want to work with. And Chris Jericho is such a big star that he's only going to work with the biggest stars. He already worked with Omega at Wrestle Kingdom. He just worked with Naito at Dominion. I think between Okada and Cody Rhodes, those are probably the 2 biggest stars outside of the WWE that he'd want to work with. Obviously, Chris Jericho in New Japan Pro Wrestling is a heel. Okada is a pretty big baby face. It just seems like this is a match that is too good not to happen. As far as when it's going to happen, I don't know. I know it will be on Japanese soil because, like I said earlier, Jericho refuses to work for Japan on U.S. territory, out of respect for Vince McMahon and the WWE. But I know that is a match that I would love to see. I think it makes all the sense in the world for it to happen. Let me know what you guys think. Use the hashtag marking out to see, converse with me. Would you want to see Jericho versus Okada? I think it would be absolutely fantastic. Moving forward to Kenny Omega here. He is the current IWGP Heavyweight Championship. He just defended his title against Cody Rhodes in San Francisco, which I'll talk a little bit more on the next podcast on Thursday. But the question right now is, what is Kenny Omega's future? And the question behind that is because his contract with New Japan Pro Wrestling expires in September. And if one thing that people are wondering about is he going to go to the WWE? He's obviously one of the biggest name outside of the WWE. The WWE just signed these massive TV deals with Fox and the USA Network to carry Raw and SmackDown, billion-dollar deals. So money right now for the WWE is not an issue. They can throw it at whoever they want, and I think it makes all the sense in the world for they're gonna throw it at Omega, right? They're gonna try and bring him to the company because he is the biggest star outside of the company, and it just makes sense to keep that talent in-house. But Omega's also always been one of those guys to say, I'm never going to go to the WWE. That's not my style. And I do respect that, being able to make a name outside of the WWE and trying to, put that on your resume. But at the same time, he's not getting any younger, and he's not going to make the kind of money anywhere else than he would at WWE, and he's not going to get the exposure anywhere else that he would with the WWE. I know it's a pride thing for him, but if you're looking at it from just a logical standpoint, New Japan's not going anywhere, but you never know when WWE is going to come calling again. He's without a doubt the hottest pro wrestler in the world right now, and I think it just makes all the sense in the world for him when he does come time to drop that IWGP Heavyweight Championship to maybe jump to the WWE. I think it just makes sense. Whether or not we would see him on the main roster or NXT, I don't know. I think if I were to call it, I would say he's probably one of those guys who goes straight to the main roster, similar to what they did with AJ Styles a couple years back. He's so well known, even without the WWE, that I don't think it would be an issue. But at the same time, I very well could see him going to NXT, keeping the Elite going with the Young Bucks, which are a tag team in which he's in a team with in New Japan Pro Wrestling. But also from a standpoint of, there's so many things that Omega could do within the WWE that he can't do without it. I don't know who's left outside of the WWE that Omega hasn't worked with that I want to see him work with. But there are so many guys in the WWE that I would love to watch him in a program with. I would love to see Omega Rollins. Love to see Omega Reigns, Omega Cena. The names are endless. But one of the things that I want to leave this podcast on is there's another contract issue up, and it's within the WWE right now, and that's with one Daniel Bryan. At the same time that Kenny Omega and the Young Bucks contracts expire in New Japan, Daniel Bryan's contract expires with the WWE. And if you want to keep Daniel Bryan in the ring, the one thing in the company, I should say, the one thing he wants more than anything is to work with the very best in the world. And if you bring Kenny Omega to the WWE, I don't know how that doesn't also convince Daniel Bryan to stay, because if he leaves, that's one of the top guys he wants to work with. So I think it just makes sense from both sides to try and want to bring both of those guys to the WWE. You have plentiful dream matches going on, and I'm excited. Obviously, it'll be a little bit. I don't think anything will happen until after the All In promotion in September, but you never know. It's a great time to be a professional wrestling fan, and I'm excited to see where everything goes. Well, that's going to do it for our first edition of Marking Out here during the summer. I will be back on Thursday at noon to talk about the current state of pro wrestling. Obviously, we just recapped the last 2 months. Now we're looking forward toward Extreme Rules, recapping Raw, SmackDown, NXT, New Japan, the match they just had in San Francisco, the G1 special. So, lots to talk about on Thursday, and we will see you then. Thank you guys so much for listening, and make sure that you subscribe to us on our Facebook page. Use the hashtag Marking Out if you want to converse with us, and we will see you guys on Thursday. So thank you guys so much, and take care. Bye-bye.